Coming up on this Friday edition of Daybreak, a draft UN resolution on North Korea's human rights issues calls for referring the country's leader Kim Jong-un to the International Criminal Court. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan tells investors in the US that Korea is ready to help lead the world out of its slow economic growth trend. Plus, Hong Kong's government cancels a meeting on Friday with pro-democracy leaders after they vowed to intensify their protests. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world, it's 6 a.m. on Friday, October 10th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broome and you are tuned in to Daybreak. Our top story this morning, the European Union has reportedly submitted a draft resolution to the United Nations seeking the referral of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. Connie Kim reports.
For the first time, it appears the United Nations is inching closer to referring North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to the International Criminal Court over the regime's human rights violations. Speaking on the condition of anonymity, a UN diplomatic source said that a draft resolution on Pyongyang's human rights abuses was circulated behind closed doors on Wednesday. The proposed resolution, written by the European Union, would need to be approved by related UN councils and the General Assembly to go into effect. The development is months in the making. Back in February, the UN Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in North Korea reported on widespread, systematic and gross violations being carried out in the north, ranging from forced labor and systematic torture to executions. A month later, the UN Human Rights Council adopted a resolution in support of the report, which was followed by an unofficial UN Security Council meeting on the matter. At a rare session on the human rights issue Tuesday, the North Korean delegation at the UN dismissed the allegations as an attempt by the United States to topple their regime. While the delegation denied the existence of prison camps in the north, they did for the first time acknowledge that they run labor camps. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea has demanded that Seoul block the cross-border spread of anti-Pyongyang leaflets by activist groups, warning it will retaliate against such acts. Watchers say Pyongyang is attempting to turn the screw on the South Korean government to position itself well ahead of planned inter-Korean talks that are very high level later this month or next month. Our Son Jung-in reports.
North Korea has strongly criticized the South Korean activist group's plan to fly anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border on Friday, as the day marks the founding anniversary of the North's ruling Workers' Party. North Korea's agency in charge of inter-Korean relations says that if Seoul does not stop the fighters of Free North Korea from going ahead with their plans, relations between the two Koreas could crumble.
If the South Korean authorities allow the leaflet scattering operation, North-South relations will again be pushed to an uncontrollable catastrophe, and Seoul will have to bear the responsibility.
Tensions have been raised since an exchange of fire earlier this week after a North Korean naval vessel violated the western maritime border. Seoul sees the move as a way for Pyongyang to position itself favorably ahead of planned high-level talks between the two Koreas. Seoul's Unification Ministry has asked the civic activists to think carefully and scrap their plan to give them the best possible chance to improve inter-Korean ties at a critical time. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea has been taking diplomatic strides in recent days and weeks to re-engage with the international community. This change in attitude has some analysts asking whether Washington should take another look at its policy of so-called strategic patience with the North. Well, James Kelly, who is a former US Assistant Secretary for East Asian and Pacific Affairs during the George W. Bush administration, he believes a policy rethink isn't likely, but adds that's why North Korea is steadily turning to South Korea. Our Hwang Sang-hee sat down with him for a chat.
It's interesting that with all the divisions in the American Congress, for example, they are unanimous on not wanting to give any money to North Korea. And as we've seen historically, when North Korea can't get anybody else to give them good things, they turn to their South Korean brothers. And this is good news, because any resolution of this issue is going to be done by Koreans on the Korean Peninsula, and not by Americans and not by Chinese.
Now that China is sort of taking a bigger role in the international sanctions against the North, and it's also becoming pretty close with South Korea, do you think that Pyongyang would want to come back to the six-party talks, knowing that it might be outnumbered?
North Korea has never wanted the six-party talks. Certainly at the early stages, it was much more of a 5+1. And when you really get into the issues, all five parties, not including North Korea, all five parties want a denuclearization of weapons on the Korean Peninsula. But I would say that the six-party talks was really the first time that South Korea had a prominent and equal position to everyone else.
Based on your experience as a chief U.S. envoy to North Korea, you've led numerous nuclear talks. Do you think it's ever possible for North Korea to fully give up its nuclear program, or have we come too far to hope for that?
It's possible, but it's not very likely. The nuclear program has benefits that have nothing to do with nuclear weapons or military deterrence or anything else. It is a vehicle that gets North Korea, that would otherwise be one of the more impoverished countries of the whole world, attention on the international stage that it couldn't get any other way. But I see the nuclear weapons question and the whole question of North Korea's isolation and its economic self-isolation from the rest of the world as very closely related problems. And so when you take care of one set of these problems, the others are going to become easier. If North Korea becomes seriously involved in world trade and interactions with other countries, it's going to be less interested in boasting about nuclear weapons that it may or may not have.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, the Japanese government has admitted it will be difficult to come up with a breakthrough policy to resolve the issue of wartime sex slavery. According to a report in a Japanese daily on Thursday, the response came during Korea and Japan's vice ministers' meeting earlier this month, as well as the two countries' foreign ministers' meeting last month. Even Japanese lower house member Koichi Hagiuda, who serves as a special advisor for Abe within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, said earlier this week in a TV news program that Tokyo does not intend to review the so-called Kono statement, as this apology has finished its role. The Kono statement is Japan's apology issued back in 1993 by a former chief cabinet secretary of the same name to women, mostly Korean, who were forced into wartime sexual slavery by Japan. Now, Korea's main opposition party has a new floor leader. Yoo Yoon-gun will lead the New Politics Alliance for Democracy for at least the next 6 months at the National Assembly. But as our Ji Myung-gil reports, he's going to have a lot on his plate.
Three-term lawmaker Yoo Yoon-gun was picked as the next floor leader of the New Politics Alliance for Democracy on Thursday. Woo, who is considered a moderate, enjoyed the support of party members loyal to former President Roh Moo-hyun, who hold a majority of the main opposition's 130 seats in parliament.
We will strive for balance and rationality within the party. All of our 130 lawmakers will negotiate with the ruling party and towards becoming a powerful main opposition. We will do our best to communicate with the people.
The 57-year-old lawmaker walks into a position fraught with challenges. He'll need to bridge the factional divides that have emerged in the party while preparing the party for its convention early next year, where a new party chairman will be selected. He'll also need to win back the support of the people. Under the leadership of former floor leader Park Young-sun, the main opposition's approval ratings have dipped to 19%. Park stepped down last week over her handling of negotiations on a special bill designed to uncover the root causes of April's ferry disaster. Woo, the new floor leader, takes the reins during the middle of a parliamentary audit of the government. The ruling and opposition parties continue to haggle over at least one key issue, that being whether to summon the heads of Korea's conglomerates for questioning. The main opposition party says they should be, so they can be asked about labor disputes at their companies. The ruling Saenuri party opposes the idea, arguing that it is not the National Assembly's place to intervene in labor disputes. Kim Jong-un, Arirang News.
Now, French novelist Patrick Modiano has won the coveted Nobel Prize for Literature. The Nobel Committee said Modiano's body of work, which often focuses on World War II and the 1940s, was recognized for its art of memory that evokes the most ungraspable human destinies. Modiano, the author of more than 24 books and several screenplays, is the 11th French writer to win this prestigious prize. The 69-year-old won the Prix Goncourt in 1978 for his novel Missing Person, and won the Austrian State Prize for European Literature in 2012. Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Friday morning. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the news centre. Hello, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark. The talks are off. The former dialogue that was to launch between pro-democracy student activists and high-level Hong Kong officials today have been scrapped, at least for now. The territory's second-ranking official, Chief Secretary Carrie Lam, said Thursday the public remarks made by student representatives over the past 2 days had seriously undermined the basis for constructive dialogue. The divide between the two sides had widened as the activists had called on supporters to return to the streets to take part in massive rallies on Friday in their new phase of civil disobedience. It also follows calls by Hong Kong's lawmakers for an independent investigation into allegations that Chief Executive C.Y. Leung had accepted some $6.4 million in bribes from an Australian engineering company, a payment that had not been made public. His office has denied any wrongdoing. The Australian company also said it was not obliged to reveal the deal. The reach of Ebola could now extend to as far as Australia. That's where a Red Cross nurse is undergoing tests in isolation after returning from Sierra Leone, where she had treated Ebola patients for about a month. Sue Ellen Kovac had been admitted to a hospital in Queensland with a fever on Thursday. The state's chief health officer confirmed the case while emphasizing that there was zero risk to surrounding communities, citing that the 57-year-old had isolated herself at her home since returning. This as heads of various international bodies are calling for a heightened response. UN Chief Ban Ki-moon said the world needs a 20-fold resource mobilization to deal with the outbreak in West Africa. At the same World Bank meeting, its leader, Jim Young Kim, said the global response has been way behind the curve, warning that a failure to act risks nothing less than the future of Africa. In Syria, the U.S.-led coalition has ramped up their airstrikes against Islamic State militants, continuing to press into the border city of Kobani. A senior local official said the jihadists were pushed out to the edge of the town after earlier reports that had said they had control over nearly a third of the predominantly Kurdish area. The U.S. Central Command confirmed 5 airstrikes since Wednesday had hit 2 groups of fighters, destroyed an IS support building, and also damaged a training camp. Earlier in the week, the Pentagon had said air support likely will not be enough to keep the town from falling into militant hands. Nearly 200,000 people have been forced from their homes in Kobani in recent weeks amid the violent clashes there. Turning now to the border area between India and Pakistan, fighting there has claimed at least 17 lives amid the worst cross-border violence we've seen in a decade. Artillery, rifle, and mortar fire continued on Thursday as a truce that had mostly held since 2003 appears now to be shaky. The fighting has affected a 200-kilometer stretch from which almost 20,000 Indian civilians have run to refugee camps. Both sides have accused the other of starting the conflict. India's defense minister warned that Pakistan would pay an unaffordable price if it did not stop shelling in the disputed Kashmir region.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan has pledged that South Korea will take a leading role in aiding the global economic recovery by highlighting its own resilience to crises and its ability to perform strongly in the new economic paradigm. Speaking at an investors' relations meeting in New York on Thursday, Choi pushed Korea's resilience and said the country was one of the first to recover following the 2008 global financial crisis. He said the world economy was steadily recovering, but uncertainties obviously still linger. Addressing over 200 foreign investors and representatives from key global financial institutions, the Korean finance minister said the government plans to inject tens of billions of dollars into the economy with the aim of raising Korea's growth rate for next year to 4%, up from the current forecast of 3.7%. For the second straight year running, Apple has been named the world's hottest brand name. Interbrand, in its annual report of best global brands, put Apple's brand value at almost $120 billion. That's up over 20% from last year. Google came in second at a price of $107 billion. Samsung Electronics took another step forward, up one notch to 7th on the list this year. The Korean tech giant's brand was valued at $45.5 billion. Other Korean companies making the cut include Hyundai Motor, which climbed 3 spots to 40th, and Kia Motors, which jumped 9 slots to 74th. Interbrand uses 3 key aspects to decide a company's brand value. 1, its financial performance. 2, its influence on the choices of consumers. And lastly, its ability to command a premium price or lock down earnings. Now, exciting times ahead, because in just over 1 week's time, representatives from 193 countries will converge on Korea's southern port city of Busan for the 2014 meeting of the International Telecommunications Union. Now, this is an organization with a very long history under the umbrella of the United Nations, and it's the first time Korea is hosting this conference after it joined the group more than 50 years ago. Our Song Ji-son reports.
It is the world's oldest international organization, originally established to promote cross-border cooperation in wire telegraphs. It is now high-tech, with an agenda that extends to managing satellite orbits. But advanced technology is no longer the only concern for the 193 countries that participate in the ITU plenipotentiary. Narrowing the information gap between nations is one task, as is sharing ICT policy experience and directions to set a common vision for the future by discussing issues like cybersecurity and child online protection. A day before the official kickoff of the ITU Plenipotentiary Conference, the annual ICT ministerial meeting, hosted by Korea for a decade now, will be held at Busan's APEC House under the theme
the future role of ICT and sustainable development with inclusive ICTs.
Korea hopes to boast its reputation as an ICT powerhouse at this event. It will be a completely paperless conference where all participants will receive updated information on their tablet PCs and smartphones throughout the sessions. We've also set up giga-scale landlines and mobile connections for that.
After hosting the event, the Korean government hopes the impression left on participants helps domestic ICT corporations expand their export channels. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning also seeks to use this opportunity to promote Seoul's creative economy models by encouraging small and mid-sized companies to exhibit their ideas and products at multiple expos held throughout the 3-week conference. 송지선, Arirang News.
And TGI Friday, everyone, as we kick things off in football, where the Korean national football team is set to face off against Paraguay later tonight. And for manager Uli Stilicke, it's a big match considering it's his managerial debut with Korea. And with the press conference taking place on Thursday, the 6-year-old German sounded pretty confident in the team, stating that he'll play to win. And while manager Stilicke focused on the defense during training, he's set to start 35-year-old Lee Dong-guk, the oldest player on the squad, and Kim Seung-dae, the youngest player, to play alongside in the offense. Meanwhile, the newly hired manager also named Ki Sung-young as the captain of the national team, as the Taeguk Warriors are set to face off against Paraguay at 8 p.m. at the Cheonan Sports Complex. Meanwhile, over to the Under-19 Asian Championship, which kicked off in Myanmar. The Korean squad, who won the last tournament back in 2012, faced off against Vietnam in their first match as Lee Jung-bin scored just before the end of the first half for a 1-0 lead before Korea blows up in the second half with 5 goals to take the first match 6-0. Now with that, we're going to shift over to the domestic league, where FC Seoul and the Ulsan Hyundai Tigers faced off on Thursday in the K-League Classic. And of course, quickly going into the match here, a rather quiet first half of the match until Kim Nam-chun in the 44th minute finds the back of the net, giving FC Seoul the 1-0 first half lead. Stays that way for the most part until Sergio Escudero in the 85th minute, 2-0 FC Seoul as he sends one past the goalkeeper. 5 minutes later, it's deja vu all over again as Escudero scores his second goal of the day, giving FC Seoul the 3 points in the 3-0 victory. And now shifting over to golf, as the 2014 Arirang Championship winner Kim Hyo-ju is set to have a rather busy 2015 season after her successful 2014 season. Now, despite rumors that the 19-year-old will now participate in the next KLPGA season, the teen sensation came out in a recent interview stating that she'll compete in both the LPGA and the KLPGA for the 2015 season. The 11th-ranked Kim plans to compete in 10 LPGA events next season, but can compete up to 15, as she plans to compete in 10 KLPGA events as well. And now finishing things off with some Thursday's KBO action, the LG Twins remain red hot with a 7-6 win against the Kia Tigers in the 10th inning, followed by the NC Dinos, who crushed the Samsung Lions 9-4. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the two struggling teams faced off as the Hanwha Eagles hosted the Tusan Bears. And now going to the game, here we go over to the second inning. Oh Jae-il RBI single to right field. That scores Kim Hyun-soo from second, and the Tusan Bears take a 1-0 lead. Tusan's Lee-jae-woo throwing a one-hitter through 5 innings, but the bullpen collapses in the 7th inning as Felix Pie ties the game with an RBI single to right. Next play, bases loaded for Kim Tae-won, but a wild pitch gives the Hanwha Eagles the 2-1 lead. Not done yet. Chung Bong-mo this time. This one, an RBI single to the left side, puts the Hanwha Eagles up 3-1 before Lee Hak-jun's RBI ground out completes the 4-run 7th as the Hanwha Eagles win this game 4-1. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Another cool morning we're waking up to, but afternoon highs should be warmer than yesterday, with highs peaking to mid-20s across the many of the country. And lots of sun will stick around throughout the day, but due to the easterly winds, people in the east could see a light precipitation of up to 5 millimeters during the day. Also, the 19th typhoon of the season, Bongfong, is approaching to southeast of Okinawa, Japan, so strong gusty winds will sweep the southern regions and Jeju for the next couple of days. With that in mind, here are the readings for today. Now, the low in Seoul kicked off at 13, then the afternoon high in the capital and Gwangju will peak at 27 and 28 respectively, while Busan hikes up to 25 later on. Now, for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon should see highs of 23 and 27, while Dokdo tops out at 20. Please be aware of big temperature gaps between lows and highs and dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. That's all for me at this hour, and let's send it back to Mark in the studio.
Well, thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there. It looks like it's going to be a lovely day here in Seoul. Well, that does it for us today. Korea Today is coming up at 7 a.m. Korea time. That's about half an hour. Have a fabulous day. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.